When it started, I mean, we had done this boot camp. We were all calling each other by our character names anyway from boot camp. So there was also, I met Anto, and he was Kraz to me. You know what I mean? I mean, we shot for a year on this, so there was it feels so embedded in that way.
This show is absolutely incredible. It makes you feel like you're right there in the cockpit with a lot of these pilots, and it does a great job of preserving the history of these missions that these men flew on. Can you tell me a little bit about your characters, Navigator Harry Crosby, and one of the best pilots in the 100th, Major Robert Rosie Rosenthal?
Yeah, well, when we first meet Crosby, he's trying to fight the Nazis, but he's also fighting uncontrollable air sickness. So there's two battles going on here for Cross at the beginning. And we really go on a real hero's journey with him.
Yeah, I mean, we meet Rosie. Rosie grew up in Brooklyn and became a lawyer. Pearl Harbor happens. He enlists right then and there and joins the war effort. Spends months and months back home before he sees action behind the cockpit, training gunners. So by the time he arrives, he's amassed a lot of experience, but he doesn't quite yet know that some of his first missions are going to be some of the most devastating in the whole 100th history.
Anthony, this show does a great job of capturing the realism these men faced in the sky. Can you talk about shooting these scenes in the cockpit and what was added for the realism?
We were in these replica B-17s, and we went up 50 feet on these hydraulic gimbals, and all around us there was 360-degree screens. So it wasn't like you would normally have, green screen or whatever, and you were having to imagine the planes. They were actually computer programmed that when we would turn, the planes, the Messerschmitts would fly at us. Whenever we would be shot at, the plane would shake. There was 250 people on these laptops in the corner, typing in all this code. It was like Minority Report. It was just this crazy setup that, it really added to the reality of what these men were facing. We tried to get as close to it as possible. Obviously, we can't, we can never speak about what that was like. We're just actors, but we tried to get as close as possible, and I feel like we've represented it well enough on screen.
There's this authenticity, talking about how accurate everything is. There's this authenticity you guys brought to these roles, and I'm sure the training kind of helped with that. Nate, can you talk about the training you did for the show and how that helped build the bonds between you and your fellow castmates?
Yeah, we worked with a military advisor called Dale Dye, who's kind of a legend. He worked on Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers and the Pacific, and we had heard stories about the boot camps on those projects, with obviously stories about infantry. What made this unique wasn't just we were marching in step and learning the rank and file and the order of life on the base in the military, but also we had to spend time with these machines in these cockpits, talking to people who've actually flown them, so that when it came time to shoot, we knew where to look, we knew which switches to flip, we knew how these maps worked, what the role of a bombardier was, all to give it this sense of cohesion. That's so important to Steven Spielberg and to Tom Hanks and to Gary Getzman, who put this together, is to try and cover every aspect of it and make it feel as authentic as possible.
Now, Anthony, a lot of these stories are real. Can you talk about the responsibility of telling these stories and honoring these men through this show?
It's interesting. I feel like for me, whenever I'm playing someone, a real person, or whenever I think about the responsibility or anything, it feels like too heavy a weight, too great a weight on your shoulders. And I think to try and get rid of all that noise, the best way you can actually serve the text and actually serve the person you're playing is to just focus on the minutiae of their life, to just think about what it was like for them day to day. When they woke up, what did they eat? What was their first thought? What did they dream about the night before? When you get into that sort of stuff, I think then it becomes easier. But it was, I try to quieten down all that noise. But the other day, we met some veterans who served in that war, and we watched the show with them. We done a screening with them, and to shake those men's hands and to look in their eyes, it really, really made an impact on me. It really brought it back to what we had done. I just can't wait for people to see the show.
Nate, the technology that these men used at the time was pretty new. They were flying blind, and 77% of these men went down. Can you talk about how this show preserves the history of air combat and the mission that these men flew?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was surprising about beginning to work on it was, we think of these machines as pretty antiquated from today's standpoint, but at the time they were state of the art, and learning about them and how they worked, it was kind of an impressive aspect of it. And then, when we were beginning to understand, in some of these first missions, where they're really grappling with, it's minus 40 degrees outside. We are at 25,000 feet. There's limited oxygen, right? Like there's so many things, the margin between life and death is so slim. And they were really learning on the fly how to cope with it and the strategies they were going to use. All, by the way, meanwhile, in the midst of trying to deliver a payload against an enemy. So it was essential for us to try and step in those shoes, not only to understand how the workings of the machine, but the conditions, right, and trying to stay focused right through all of that.
Look, in the show we have nicknames like Bucky, Buck, Rosie, and Bubbles. Did you guys kind of have any nicknames for each other when you guys were going through your training at all?
When it started, I mean, we had done this boot camp. We were all calling each other by our character names anyway from boot camp. So there was also, I met Anto and he was Kraz to me. You know what I mean? I mean, we shot for a year on this, so there was it feels so embedded in that way.
But offset, Nate likes to be called Big Papa.
Yeah, at all times
going forward.
There you go. Now, Anthony, we'll start with you on this one. What did you learn about yourself through this experience and playing this character?
Nothing. I don't think I learned anything about myself, but I learned a lot about Crosby. I learned a lot about him, and I learned just how incredible he was as a human being, and what a joy, what an honor it was to play him.
When I was asking myself, how I would have fared under these kinds of extraordinary circumstances, the courage and the sacrifice of these men, of my character in particular, just astonished me, and I remain astonished by those feats still to this day.
This is an incredible show. Like I said, it's a must watch. It puts you right there, and it really does a great job preserving this history. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Man. Cheers.